In the dimly lit, foreboding hall, a messenger pigeon arrived, a letter securely fastened around its neck, heading toward the mysterious figure who coveted the Perdium estate. The figure, Count Desmond, Harold Desmond, loomed in the shadows. A figure who commanded everything from behind the scenes. As if performing an action long ingrained, he accepted the pigeon, his grip unwavering. With measured motion, he opened the letter. Inside, a report confirmed the partial reclamation of the Forest of Beast, suggesting a territorial war with the Dygald family and the eventual destruction of Perdium. After that, the ducal house would intervene. With sharp eyes, Count Desmond read the report. The destruction of Perdium. His voice carried a weight that left no room for doubt. Before him, those gathered under his command sat around a circular table, representatives from across the kingdom awaiting his directive. One of them, pondering aloud, wondered if they should reduce Perdium to a lordless land. Another expressed that the time had come. A third suggested that the ducal house likely intended to appoint a new ruler for Perdium. Count Desmond then asked how many of his people were still in Perdium. One of his subordinates answered that 2 retainers and 1 knight remained. He immediately ordered the 2 retainers to be sent to Dygald's territory. The fact that the missing Dygald heir had been found dead in the Perdium estate would be enough justification for war. Furthermore, Count Desmond added that Victor would take full command of the operation. This command caught the attention of the gathering. One person expressed disbelief, stating that it was surprising they were deploying Desmond's strongest card so soon. Another remarked that if Frank had done his job properly, Perdium would have fallen on its own. A third person, questioning the need for Victor's involvement, wondered if the ducal house, usually so discreet, had shifted its approach. Count Desmond explained that the Forest of Beasts had changed everything, though the others were left to wonder whether it held some unknown riches. Standing up, Count Desmond asserted that every decision followed Duke Belfine's will, instructing his subordinates not to question any orders. He then asked if anyone else knew about the situation in Perdium. The scene shifted to Rayfold Estate, where Amelia screamed in distress, her cries filling the room. Leaning her head against Bernarfa's chest, she shouted Gislin's name. Bernarf stood still, allowing her to cry, her body trembling as he did so. Amelia muttered about how Gislin had secured a runestone mine using the 20,000 gold he had taken from her. Even after sending the Wildcats, they had failed to kill him. She had even humbled herself before her father to cut off Perdium's funding. The realization burned, and it had all made her look like a fool. With a calm voice, Bernarf suggested that Amelia was not acting like herself. Taking a long breath, Amelia acknowledged it, admitting she had let her emotions take over. She quickly gathered herself and turned to her table, stating that what was done was done. It was clear she was already plotting her next move and started cooking, focusing on both Gislin and Perdium. Bernarf, sensing her renewed determination, smiled and offered to follow any order she gave. Amelia explained that now that they had discovered the runestone mine, Perdium's financial troubles would soon end. Bernarf mused that a celebration might be underway there. However, Amelia pointed out that the important thing was that they hadn't sold the runestones yet. According to their latest intelligence, the runestones had only been secured 2 days ago, which wasn't enough time to establish a reliable supply chain. She decided they would exploit that weakness. Amelia concluded that the only place in the north where they could sell the runestones was the Northern Tower, ruled by the 7th Circle Archmage Delmud, known as the Tower of Advancement. Runestones were essential for magical research, and magic towers always took securing such supplies seriously. She commanded Bernarf to set up an ambush with wildcats along the main route to the tower. Their target wouldn't be Gislin, but the workers transporting the runestones. They would disrupt the transportation, causing chaos, and in the confusion, they would seize the runestones. Bernarf raised a concern about the Crimson Tower in the Brivant territory, but Amelia reassured him, explaining that the Crimson Tower had been in decline and that Gislin would never seek the lower-paying tower when the Tower of Advancement offered more. Amelia's voice was filled with determination as she proclaimed that this time, she would take everything from Gislin Perdium. Meanwhile, at the Perdium estate, Gislin rested, having been worn out from the battle with the beast. Though valiant in his fight, his body had finally given in, requiring time to recover fully. When Gislin had been swallowed whole by the blood python, survival had seemed impossible. After all, he was only human. The blood python, a predator of its level, had its own process for digesting prey. Before passing food into its esophagus, the snake secreted venom to dissolve its prey for easier digestion. However, the mana released from Gislin's third core burned the venom upon contact, preventing it from invading his body. The toxic fumes created in the process, though, filled the air, making it a deadly environment for anyone attempting to breathe. Most prey would have lost consciousness or died during the process, but Gislin, bearing the future of his estate on his shoulders, told himself to endure. If he lost consciousness inside the blood python's mouth, everything would be over. The expedition, his precious family, and his future would be lost. In that critical moment, knowing he could not avoid the poison, Ghislain decided to make it his own. He channeled the poison that had entered his body, attempting to absorb it into his mana core. Using the fierce rotation of mana within his core, he worked to neutralize the poison. This technique, requiring delicate mana control, could only be achieved by those who had reached superhuman levels, and Ghislain attempted it. He could not be certain of his success, but he decided to try. He used it as an alternative fuel to withstand mana explosions, and this, he believed, was how he would break free from the blood python's grasp. After 2 days of sleep, Ghislain finally woke up. To his surprise, the usual aches in his body were gone. Instead, he felt refreshed. As his memories slowly returned, he sat up, feeling a haze in his mind. He wondered where he was. He remembered receiving forgiveness from his father, but everything after that was unclear. As he gathered his thoughts, he noticed Elena sitting by his bed, as though she had been tending to him the whole time he had been unconscious, waiting for her brother to wake up. Without warning, Elena rushed toward him and hugged him tightly, relieved to see him awake. She explained that he had woken up after 2 days, and after leaving without a word, he had suddenly collapsed upon his return. A flood of emotions overtook her, but once the initial worry faded, her voice softened, greeting him with a familiar warmth. Still trying to make sense of everything, Ghislain nervously muttered her name. But before he could process it further, Elena abruptly pushed him back onto the bed and ran out of the room, calling out to Belinda that her brother was awake. Ghislain's thoughts remained focused on the situation at hand. 2 days after emerging from the blood python's body, he had received only minimal first aid from Belinda before continuing to work. He had tried to endure until the runestones were sold, but his young body had not been able to handle it, causing him to collapse. His thoughts deepened as he reflected on his recklessness. Considering how reckless he had been, Ghislain realized his body was in surprisingly good condition. Sleeping for just 2 days shouldn't have been enough to recover from such damage. He assessed his body and noted something strange. His recovery rate had drastically improved, and his mana capacity had increased. When he tried to gather his mana, he noticed that its nature had changed. Ghislain wondered if his mana had fused with the blood python's energy during the process of neutralizing the poison in his core. He murmured to himself that he never knew in his past life that he could grow stronger in such a way. The risk he had taken had certainly paid off. He would need to run some tests after dealing with more pressing matters. One thing was certain, which if this method worked, he could become dozens of times stronger in no time. A content smile crossed his face, but his focus quickly shifted to the matter at hand. Selling the runestones was now the priority. 2 days had passed, and by now, everyone who needed to know about the runestone mine was already aware. Ghislain quickly got dressed, intending to gather the mercenaries immediately. Just then, someone knocked on his door. He assumed it was Belinda and called out to her, telling her there was no need to knock. However, to his surprise, his father entered the room, followed by Belinda, who wore a cheerful expression upon seeing him standing, and Elena, who had a sheepish grin on her face. Walter, his father, exclaimed his relief that Ghislain was awake. Ghislain responded, startled by his father's words, and confirmed that he was fine. Visibly relieved, Walter expressed his satisfaction that Ghislain was okay. Coming to his side abruptly, Belinda ran her hand along his face, nagging him like a child. She scolded him for suddenly collapsing and expressed how worried they had been. Ghislain reassured her nonchalantly that he was fine. Walter stepped closer to Ghislain, asking if they could talk. Standing before his son, Walter then said that he had a request. Ghislain, confused, listened intently, for his father had never spoken to him this way before, as he had always viewed him as the failure of the Pertium estate's heir.